live. Aido, how are you doing? You had a good day?
I'm doing great. How are you, Glenn?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Yeah, so for those that probably don't know, I'll do a little intro before jumping into this conversation about you. But we're both based in New York. Actually, you're New Jersey now, or still New York?
Yeah,
I forgot.
New Jersey, but I'm still
New
in New
York.
York.
Got it, got it. So yeah, I'm excited to chat about just your journey into drumming, and where you started. So I can see with the accent, and people probably heard about you before or met you before. But for those that haven't, you are actually originally from Ireland, right? And so, but now live in New York. What was it like growing up and picking up like drumming for the first time?
I was one of those kids that was surrounded by it. My dad was a lead tip of Clondalkin Pipe Band. They were at the time they were in grade five. He had played with Fintan Lawlers. They were a big band in the '60s. Um, my grandfather on my mother's side was in that band as well as some other granduncles. They met through pipe bands, and my dad was also a drum kit player. But we came up through pipe bands in Ireland. Basically, it was Host St. Lawrence by the time I started. I was born in '76, so by like 79, 80, I was kind of really starting to pay attention to what was going on, and seeing my dad as carrying one of the old blue Premier drums around way before the HTS drums even. With the white heads on them, and having his gang of players that were pretty good for the day. Um, and he was taking a note and a lot of influence from Alec Duttard. So the style of pipe band drumming was already in Ireland. Of course, the guys up in the in Northern Ireland were doing well with that. Bobby Ray and the Scullions and guys like that. So it was my dad was very kind of interested in that style of drumming, and he was very good at teaching and producing good drum corps, winning drum corps, as well as solo players. So just by association and going to these parades and competitions, and then eventually the band hall, which was in Howth, not far from where I lived, um, and then just picking up the sticks. And it was never forced on me or anything like that. Me and my brother started around the same time. He was a bit older than me, but I just genuinely liked it, and haven't changed my mind since. So so yeah, it was through direct family, my immediate family, but even my godfather Johnny Keogh, he was the lead tip for St. Lawrence O'Toole's before Stephen Crichton. So they were coming up in the late '80s, up into grade two, eventually into grade one, and they were the formidable band in the south, and impossible to beat. Um, so yeah, it just kept going like that, and all. Yeah, I'm just surrounded by it all the time. 2 nights a week of practice, sometimes weekends, competitions, going to the same competitions every year. Kilkenny, Durrow, the ones up the north, where it was really, really tough to compete against the northern bands. So we had our eyes set on that. And we go up as often as we could. Which whatever drum corps that we happened to be with at the time, because we did bounce around quite a bit in between Dublin. After Dublin, we went to Limerick with Dunraven pipe band, then we went to Cork, Ring of Skiddy pipe band, then we went back to Kildare, closer to Dublin, in a band called Lord Edward's Own, and then finally I just did 1 year, uh, 1999, I guess it was, with St. Lawrence O'Toole's. Myself, my brother, and my sister joined the same year. Happened to be a transition year. I think the new Pearl drums had just come out, and we had an orange set, but the band wasn't what it became. A few years later, I think they got their first worlds in drumming in grade one in 2006. My brother and sister were still playing with them, but I was already over in America quite a few years. So I
Right,
missed that
right,
one.
right. Yeah, yeah. So you were really surrounded with, I mean, everybody. It looks like you named everyone from your family, and everyone was a drummer. Was like, you got your lesson right away with your dad, who is judging, and now a sort of a figure within the pipe and drumming world? Was it like you got lessons from him right away, or did you feel like you wanted to do your, maybe your, like, learn on your own, or what was the process?
No, I wasn't that cocky or arrogant to think that I could do it all on my own. I guess I realized that at a young age, or that's the way I think of it now. Maybe I just did what I was told, which was the right way. So dad got myself and Julian started. And I remember it, out in the shed on pads. They had this kind of a white table. It was a kind of a hi-fi unit thing, but it was a good height and a good sound off it. And I remember him, like starting us with the long roll, the mammy and daddy and stuff. Um, and then my mother, she was teaching me, because I was playing. I was kind of getting into the tenor drumming. It was my first. Um, I think I did a year, maybe a year and a half of tenor drumming. But she was teaching us how to march and to play. My mother used to also play as well in Narramore back in the 60s. So, she knew exactly what was going on, what sounded right, what didn't sound right, what was in time, what was good technique, what was lousy playing. Without being a highly accomplished player herself, she was very much able to hold her own when she was playing, and she knows more than she lets on. But she did help us out quite a bit at the start. My dad was sort of overseeing things, and then the amazing June Nolan came into the picture in the early 80s. And uh, I don't know if you know who she is, but she's been around for a long time. And all of the chorus that my dad was in, um, very, very knowledgeable. Also a world champion, a ladies world champion, kind of mid 80s. Played in every corps that I played in Ireland. And she was she put the hard work into me, teaching me and pushed me to do the solos, not letting me away with crazy, careless playing. Um, I guess without being any sort of arrogant around like that, I guess I had some good hands. I had a little bit of promise, um, and if they told me to do something, I could do it. And my rolling was good for the age that I was. So she took me on and brought me up through the solo career that I had, uh, which really got going around the very late 80s and all the way through the 90s. And that was all with June Nolan and my dad kind of just keeping an eye on me and advising me and giving me the scores to play, tell me what to do, tell me what not to do. And it was very successful. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It was a great education, and I didn't question them. I just said, yeah, okay, you're right, that makes sense. And whenever I
Nice.
took my own idea or I got old enough to say, hey, well, what about this? They might, they'll listen to me. Whether I'm right or wrong is another thing, but they would listen to me and encourage me to have my own way of doing things as well. So between the solos, the bands, then the exams came along with the Irish Pipe Band, Irish College Irish Pipe Band College. I can't really remember what the hell it was, but anyway, it was geared towards the Scottish exams, the elementary, intermediate, and advanced exams. That was supposed to get you kind of qualified, to be a judge. So we did our 8 grades through that, and my dad was the head of that college. Him and Sam Bailey from the north of Ireland kind of set it up down south, and they got a curriculum going, and it was very, very good. It was a very successful college that taught a lot of the players in the south, those who wanted to learn, a lot more theory and an understanding about not only their instrument that they were on, but the other instrument, pipes. We had to know a little bit about what they were playing, and they got to learn a
Right.
bit about what we were doing. So we were able to talk each other's language, which is important, you
Nice.
know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Were you it's funny you mentioned like doing the course and everything. Was it something that, growing up and being surrounded with everyone in your family doing it and doing competition, and then doing this, the curriculum, were you very early on like, I want to learn more out of, like, I want to potentially, make a living out of this? Was it something that you considered quite early on, like at that point?
yeah, I don't remember when I made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do, but I could go as far back as my first memory, thinking that yeah, I, I'm I'm going to play a drum for the rest of my life, or many drums. I do the drum kit thing as well. So there was nobody had to tell me or nobody had to ask me. I'd already made up my mind, and I don't know when that was. But as a kid, I mean, you want to be all sorts of things, and you change your mind every week. But I always wanted to do, you know, well, I always wanted to be a drummer. So, and I still want to be a drummer. So there was never any
Yeah,
other
yeah,
question
yeah, and you are.
for anything else, you know. And I'm still
That's
trying.
awesome. Um, Yeah. That's great. But so, and then going back to like these years when you were talking about the, Ireland versus Northern Ireland and probably Scotland, and you were saying about how the competition was, it was a fierce competition with Northern Ireland and probably Scotland. What was it like your first trip to Scotland for the Worlds? I imagine the Worlds were probably in Glasgow at the time, or maybe it was somewhere else. What was
Yeah,
that memory as a kid? Um, you know, Going over to rather Northern Ireland or Glasgow to attend the World and try to compete? What was it like?
I would have been, I think, 8 years of age, I believe, when I played in my first Worlds in the juvenile under 14. And yeah, it was a huge adventure. It was great. I'd already done some, quite a bit of traveling already. Uh, I did some solo competitions in Ireland, so I wasn't just put in straight away. Huge vetting process to be able to be uh, considered to be brought over. And I mean, the one who considered it and eventually paid for it was my father, because he's my dad. So uh, yeah, Glasgow first time. I think I was 8 years of age, and I took a bronze in juvenile. Second year, I took a silver, and then the year after that, I won it for the first time. So it was first exciting, and we'd go to the same hotel, the Crest Hotel. And at that age, you're a kid. You're going to a different country. It might as well be a different planet, and you're excited about everything and all the rehearsal that you've done and all the guidance that you've gotten, and hopefully the practice is enough. You can always use more, but it was enough to get me in the prize list each and every time, actually. You know?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great, and I imagine when you're so young and like you said, it's another planet. You're like kind of like going with the flow, doing what you love doing, and see how it goes. And you got great results. So that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Pretty great.
And one of my favorite
Um,
parts was going to Joe Noble's band room when he had that shop. I can't remember the name of the street, but yeah, he had the great Joe Noble, and I go over every time, and of course, there's plenty of sticks. All of the gang of Dublin drummers, we'd all be there. There was a lot of successful solo players. Derek Doyle from he plays with St. Lawrence O'Toole, or did for a long time. I think he's playing with Black Raven now. But there was a lot of great players. John Ruxton, uh, like I said, June Nolan, my brother Julian was playing. I was playing, and my dad brought over another load of players as well, and we were picking prizes left, right, and centre. But anyway, yeah, Joe Noble's shop. He was selling a lot of drum kit stuff. So that's a kid in the candy store, and I'm still like that. I still go around hunting music shops and looking at the kits and hitting the cymbals and checking out the snares and whatever other gadgets and gizmos that they got that are like, ooh, I want that. Typical. You
Yeah,
know?
I must say, you're one of the few people that know that every time we have a conversation, you're excited about a new pair of sticks or a new book that just came out or a new drum, or you love the instrument, and I can tell that from just having a conversation with you. What was that moment when, obviously, you talking a little bit about how there's the pipe and snare drum, but you also do a lot of percussion, and you're great at like that ensemble sort of like aspect of not just snare, but the tenor drumming and bass and obviously drum kit. Were you also taking listen on the side, like drum kit lessons, or did it just came out naturally through pipe and drumming? Like which one came first?
Pipe band drumming came first, but all of that time, um, my dad had a drum kit in the shed that was in cases. He had basically in the early 70s, I guess around by the time that I was born, he was starting to wind down from doing the show band stuff to very very busy all the way through the 60s. Literally playing 5 nights a week, a day job, looking after a family, doing the pipe band stuff. It was crazy for him. Something had to give. because he was just doing too much, traveling too much, and going on 24/7 basically. So with everything, he said, look, maybe this is getting a bit tiresome. The DJs are coming in, so all the show bands are now, they're getting, they're losing their careers. So the drums went into the shed, and I very occasionally see him doing a bit of session work or something like that as a young kid, or see him up on a big stage, and he'd be hired to do something, I don't know, the Chieftains or something like that, and he'd be the kit player, and I'm just absolutely mesmerized, thinking that, wait a second, I thought you could only hit one drum. Apparently, there's a lot more that you can sit down, and you got pedals and all sorts. So I annoyed the hell out of him. Dad, will you set up the drums and cymbals? Set up the drums and cymbals. Like as a young kid, 6, like driving him crazy. And I wasn't ready for it. He thought I would break it. I probably would have. And eventually he set them up like for a week or something like that. And he took them back down for something else, for another gig or something, and they stayed back in cases again, and I just wouldn't let them off the hook, and the kit stayed permanently set up. So my dad would start me off with your basic 4/4 rhythms, trying something a bit of a 3/4, like a 12/8, a bit of basic jazz, and then it was off to the races. It really was. It was just like, okay, I want to make this drum kit bigger. I want to get better. I want new stuff, and and all the rest. And I wasn't spoiled or anything. I had to earn it. And my mother made me a deal. Says, listen, if you do well in the World Championships, or if you do well in an All Ireland Championships, I'll get you something nice for the kit. Now, don't go crazy, but I'll get you something nice. So, hence came in a Sabian cymbal, a new Zildjian cymbal, a new bass pedal, rototoms, chimes, this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden, uh, I got the kit downstairs. It's a wall of debt. It's 360. It's all around me. So that just kind of that's the real joy, and still is, because with the pipe band technique, it really helps your drum kit playing, and drum kit helps your pipe band stuff too, because you have this sense of orchestration, or a little bit of a kind of an approach to it, because of the use of tom toms, and tenors are basically tom toms, right? So you get an idea of
Yeah.
what the tonal value can be, and what they can bring to, um, what they're supposed to bring to pipe bands. So, tom toms and pipe bands, they kind of like, all right, there's a lot in common here, and I can have it. When it came to writing midsection stuff, I could start from somewhere. I could have a stab after, and after writing the snare line, well, then I knew all the accents were. I heard the music in my head, and I knew the tunes, obviously, because I was writing to the pipe scores. So it just kind of, now I'm not the best at it, and it was a struggle. It's quite difficult to do, and there's a number of different systems to whatever way you want to write it and explain it to your tenor drummers. But I figured out my own way of doing it, and it took a while, but we got it done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's very true, and also it makes sense now. Like you're saying, uh, obviously having played with you, it's very powerful, especially ending part and well orchestrated, and it definitely comes from being able to play the kit and all those tenors that you're talking about. Do you think that when you listen to a band, a medley or whatever, do you what do you pay attention to the most? Is it the snare line? Is it the midsection? Is it the ensemble? I imagine it's a little bit of everything, but what do you appreciate the most in like a good medley in terms of like pipe band drumming?
Groove. I like when the music is aggressive, it's lively, it's ticking all the boxes for technique, staying within the idiom. It's okay to go out a little bit outside it, if you're trying something new, if you don't go too far with it. Yeah, something a little bit different, some flash, and then you gotta have the lower end too, where it's not just all drummers overtaking the pipe chord. That's not right either. It's not good ensemble. But being a drummer, and being from the south, there's a sort of a I like the aggressiveness of drumming and the rock and roll side of it. So if a chord comes in, and like I said, it's clean, the stuff is well written, whether it be a jig, a strathspey, even a slow air, it doesn't matter. If there's imagination, if it's not ripped off from every other, great lead tip that's been around for so long. And there's a little bit of, you know, adventure in the score writing, and it's presented well. You got my ear, and if it doesn't have an edge, I'm not interested. Basically, so
Right.
and
Yeah.
that edge
A bit of
comes
groove.
from
Yeah.
that can be in piping, that can be in the tone of your bass drum. It can be a run through the tenors, or the tone or the sustain from the tenors, or the snare line in whatever particular way you want to, whatever catches your ear. But it comes from all over the place. One of the years I went to the Worlds, 2012, I think it was. My favorite thing I heard for the whole week that I was there was a slow air by Inverary, and I wasn't even close to it. I just heard it, and the harmonies just absolutely it blew me away. It sounded like a Gregorian chant or something like that. I don't know what it was, and I never heard it afterwards. But it was the best thing I had heard all week. I'm like, all right, piping. It did it for me this time. So I'm not a piper. I'm not qualified to talk to these guys with and tell them how to play their instrument. But I've been around like you have long enough to know what's good, what's bad. I don't know, Clarence. Do you play pipes?
No, no, I don't. But I appreciate when I talk to pipers and they said the same thing as you, which is like, I really like that rhythm that, was in this medley, a few years ago or recently. And I'm like, I can't help but smile and be like, well, I'm glad you're listening to what the other instrument is doing. Just like you are like, what caught my attention was not percussion, it was not drumming, which is your thing, but it was actually I don't know, harmonies or melody line or whatever. And I think it means that we pay attention to one another. I think that's important. So.
Yeah, well, you have to. No, neither end of the band can ignore the other. You just can't. It doesn't work like that. Not anymore. Not at the level the pipe bands have come to, and the education and the appreciation for what's going on. And if you want to be a leader of a big band, you got to know what you're talking about. So you can't ditch one or the other. That's just not going to
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah.
I ain't going to get out of grade
Yeah.
four big.
That's definitely true. What was the transition like? So you were growing up and you were a core member under most likely your dad and then you took over leading drummer. What was the first band that you were leading drummer of? New York band?
Oddly enough, it was I moved over here to the United States in 2000, basically, um, to be a rock drummer, and I really didn't know there was a New York scene. Until I met, I knew Vivian Staple, and he's a big drummer in these parts, and he's done a lot for pipe band drumming in the New York area. Originally from Tala, and played with Clondalkin, played under Stephen Crichton, and he has that flavour, he has that sound, he has that style type of thing. So he was the only guy that I knew in pipe bands, and he heard that I was going over. So I went down to Saffron Kilts, now Saffron United in Long Island, and just for a weekend, because he's like, hey, this Dublin guy is in town. Do you want to bring him down for a clinic? And the band, in fairness, and they've always been very good at bringing in, pipe majors and lead tips from different parts of the world to help them out. They gave me a shot, and then a few months later, I got signed to a record deal here, so my rock band moved over, but I wasn't in really the. I wasn't. I just done 15 years hardcore pipe band drumming, all the competitions through the summer, all of the winter competitions, the solo ones, every other parade that you can think of, and that pipe band life. So I was really coming to America to try the rock and roll thing, try my spin at that, and so I wasn't playing with anybody up until about 2007, I think, maybe 2008, and I eventually went to Saffron as a lead tip. Um, and they had a grade 5 core and they had a grade 3 core, and they've been asking me for years, friends, mutual friends of ours, like, when are you coming down? When are you coming down? And then eventually, like, look, if you come down, you just be the lead tip. Is that cool? I'm like, you know what? All right, I'll give it a shot. And that was my first time. So all of a sudden, I had to write an MSR. I'm like, oh, wow. Hold on. Now, having kind of honed in my skills over the previous few years, writing simpler scores for parade bands and union bands and rudimental sheets, my own spin on rudiments, I had the layout, I had the notation. I'd already done my advanced exam 8 9 years beforehand, so I could write, but could I compose at a level that was competitive in grade three? So I wrote an MSR, and I straight away I sent it over to my dad to proofread it, and I kind of was like, all right, tell me what you think, type of thing. But he was like, all right, okay, what about this and what about that? I was like, oh, I never thought of this. All right, yeah, I see what you mean. And he's like, no, but everything else is good. You're writing for the right, I haven't described the drum corps, the different levels of players that I had. Um, you had to be cognizant of what I could do and what I couldn't do, to get everybody
Right.
playing. You can't write too hard, you obviously can't write too easy either. So it was a good balance. The stuff was challenging and it was correct, for the most part. So my time
Was
signatures.
that the most challenging thing?
I'm sorry.
Do you think was it do you think that was the most challenging thing, going from being a core player to all of a sudden, right, you're leading drummer, and you were coming from, grade one level. I mean, you're obviously a very good drummer, and then all of a sudden you have to write for, grade three, grade five, and you have to sort of make sure that it's not too hard, but it's not too easy. Was this the writing part? Was it the most difficult part, or was it more the sort of the management and having people to teach how to play?
A good question might be to ask some other players, to ask them, well, how was this guy when he first came in? My opinion, or my memory of it, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge. Um, hadn't been around the game for so long, and slightly out of the pipe band game for a few years because I was on the road. I came back to it with full steam ahead. Absolutely said, yeah, I think I can do this. I'm not going to go in without asking my dad and asking June Nolan for certain questions, and is this right? Is this right? What do you think of this? Whatever. I had their advice and their backing all the time, but I felt confident that I could do it. I enjoyed writing the stuff. I enjoyed the challenge of it. I knew the pitfalls of writing a score, throwing in too much, or being repetitive, or stealing from somebody else, even subconsciously. Try to do your own thing, um, and and because I was a kind of a loud player. I didn't know I was loud until I came to America. People was like, "Wow, you really got an Irish style of playing." I'm like, "What is an Irish style of playing?" It says loud and ballsy, for want of a better word. I'm like, all right, I can live with that. So to get into a lead tip role, and I don't know, at one point in that first year in that core, I had 11 sides, so it was a lot of volume to deal with. So I'm like, oh, I think I might need to play louder than everybody else. That's not a problem. I like doing that. It's just I like to play. Um, you got to be a little stronger. You got to be a bit demanding as a lead tip. Otherwise, it's just not going to project from the back. So I sat into that role very comfortably, and you know, we had a couple of good, we had a couple of good years. The core wasn't always the cleanest, but it was definitely a good stepping stone. And then we branched off, and New York Metro came about, and then it was all the really good players around the area that had basically come from Saffron anyway. A lot of those players came in, and
Right.
that was handed to me on a plate. These amazing players from all around the area, different bands, and Mike O'Rourke at the helm, going, well, we got this guy from this band. I never heard of him, and this fella used to play with these guys over here, and he's really good. So I stood, by then I just pulled out the kitchen sink, and I was able to write the stuff that I really wanted to play, which was very, very
Right.
challenging because I knew I had the guys that can handle it.
Right, right, right. When you said that you took the saffron role, was you were coming to the U.S. to do rock band, which we'll dive more into it in a minute. But you were not necessarily like into not into pipe band anymore, but it was not your main focus at the time. And then you got back into it, and you enjoyed that leading drummer role. You felt like New York Metro was, like you just said, it was like I had the players, I could write the music that I wanted to play. Do you think that was like peak for you, well, especially because you guys won the world, which is an amazing achievement. That was peak in terms of like how much you obviously having the players, writing the music, having fun, and then also you felt like you were 100% committed to pipe band drumming at that time.
Absolutely. And the challenge of the music, the style of the tunes, we had some very tricky time signature changes going on, especially under Matt Welsh. And because he's an operatic writer as well as was a piper with SFU. But I was like, listen, throw whatever you got at me. I'll handle it. And he's like, "You sure? Okay." So there was some medleys that were really kind of off the wall a little bit, and going from 9/16 to 2/4 to 6/8 to 11/8 to one bar after the next. Like, are we insane doing this and trying to get judges to cop onto it on one listen? But we did it anyway, and it was fun. And the stuff was good, and it was once we worked it out, and it actually made sense. It was great, and I loved doing all that stuff. And it was um, like any band that's kind of making their way up through the ranks and they're serious about it. There's a ton of material on the table, and I wrote a lot of stuff, and none of it was easy. Not even the street tunes. I didn't play the mass band stuff or anything. I wrote my own 4/4s and 3/4s and 6/8s, and believe me, playing them on a cold March morning for the St. Paddy's stuff. That was a bit of a challenge, and I could have eased up a little bit on the difficulty just for those, but I didn't want to let standard slip. I wanted to push. I wanted to be like a grade one writer in a grade three band, and that's what I was kind of going for.
Right,
And the challenge of that,
right, right, right,
it was flary. There was all sorts of things. So that's where I had hit my peak, I guess, like you say, in pipe bands here, you know.
right, right, right. It's that's why I'm excited to talk to you, because it's really, you have, I guess, two ways to approach things, right? It's like we're gonna make things that work and that are efficient and effective in some ways, and then you have another area of people, including you, that are like very creative and very lots of ideas, and to push the craft to some areas that are. I like that area, or like that approach, because you rather love it or hate it, but at least you listen to it and you're like, you feel something, right? And when I listen to, looking back, you were probably the perfect person to be with Matt Welsh, because both of you had that mentality of like, let's do something that is out of the box and that no one's done before, and you might not like it or you might love it, but at least you will remember it. And I remember being in Glasgow and heard you guys, it must have been in 2010. It was probably the year you won, and I didn't know who the band was. I didn't know any of you guys back then, and you played Spice of Life, and it was like the jig, and then I think it was a hornpipe set,
Yeah,
and it caught my attention because I had never heard that before. And I think that's something that sometimes pipe band is missing. It's too polished, and there's no this thing that like, oh wow, like this is out there, but interesting. You know what I mean? And then that's what, like, you have that sort of style of, let's do something that um uh touches people, over just being like, yeah, that was a good drum corps. I would hate to hear someone say, yeah, it's pretty good. But if it was like, wow, that was like out there, I might not like it or I may like it, but at least I will remember 5, 10 years from now. And that's what you were going for.
that's cool. Yeah, yeah. There was that set was yeah. It was just kind of, I got good tunes. Me and the pipe major were very good friends too. And we basically 90% of the tunes that he came to me, it's like, oh yeah, I really like that. And he wouldn't be 2 bars into it, and I'm like, I'm hearing syncopation, I'm hearing groove, I'm hearing this nice melody, plenty going on, good hornpipes, cool jigs, nice sounding reels. And then you have your traditional stuff for your MSRs that are, yeah, all very recognizable tunes, some heavy hitters in there. You got to behave yourself, you got to be on point for those, and you got to be if you're going to write an MSR, you have to write it within strict boundaries. You can still take risks, and you can still have your own idea, whether you think it's your own idea or not. It can be your, in the moment, if you come up with it, well, it's your own idea. Turns out it could be from somebody else, but There's so many of these notes that have been going around. Sometimes we can't help it. We think we come up with something ourselves, but hey, listen, shots back in 1988 were playing that. That's exactly their move. Well, I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't know, I didn't steal it. It's just coincidence. It can happen. But my approach to everything was, um, like I said, if it didn't have an edge, not all that interested. Had to have a little bit of adventure. Had to be fun to play, and there had to be some very, very big moments of, yeah, take a run and jump at this accent. You know what I mean? Or the end of a roll, or a big
Right.
long run, or something like that. Because if it's too stiff, if it's too, you know, it just kind of gets boring, and it might be perfectly clean, it might be very, very nice, but completely unoriginal. And yeah, that can win a competition too. Great, no problem. I'm not knocking any performance or any band that's that way at all, or any player. But it's just something that I like to go with, which is like, all right, I'm going to put a bit of fire under this. How I'm going to do it, I'm not sure. I'll let you know when I finish it, type of thing, And
That's
especially,
exactly that. I love it. This is great. Yeah.
yeah, especially towards the end of a medley. Okay, you're coming out and you got these strong, there's all these harmonies bouncing around in the in the pipe core. You're on the tail end of it. You go out with a big Hollywood ending, don't you? No, you can't just sit back and let it finish. You have to put that spin at the end. If especially like after hearing all the many, many, many great bands, including your band this year, Glaren, and congrats again for winning the Worlds. That's amazing. Bog Hall and all of the great bands way before I ever came along. You take your influence and you like things. The Canadians, when they came over, the 78s, SFU, all these guys, they were, they were absolutely, and the Australian guys, Victoria Police, they were kind of changing the whole approach to the game, and they were bringing in the crowds as well in the 80s and the 90s, like. So yeah, my mom, we'd all be at the Worlds. Like my mom would be off at the grade one listening to Toronto Police, or listen to the Canadians, because they had a slightly different take on it than the Irish and the Scottish, and it was all these great pieces that were exciting. My mom sings in the choir; she knows her music, and she knows her pipe bands too. Um,
Yeah.
so stuff that kind of caught her ear, and there, like you were just saying, the performances that you remember are the exciting ones. You don't remember the boring, perfectly clean ones, do you? You remember something that's a little bit different. And same for me. You know?
Yeah, no, that's very true. You have to excite the crowd. You have to excite it, and I think it was. I'm glad we're talking about this, and I hope that people that will listen to this episode will connect with what you're saying in terms of like exciting the crowd and being something that is exciting to listen to. Um, I want to be mindful of your time, and there's something I want to touch on with, which is I don't know if many people know, but you did mention a little bit that you moved to America and you moved to the US to be a rock star, and obviously you're playing a lot of drum kit. What was one you were playing with a band that was actually touring? It was before I came to New York, and I wish I went to one of the concerts. But you had a very successful band that was touring around. What's the journey like? What was the yeah, what was that moment in your life?
Well, I've always worn two drumming hats. One is the pipe band one, and one is the drum kit. So the drum kit, I was playing that all the time. Met a couple of guys literally around the corner from me. And they're like, we were out in the fields passing by the back of your house, and we heard this drum kit. We have a band we want to start. So that was like 1987. By 1992, we started a band, two brothers, a second cousin, a singer, and me. And we called ourselves MrNorth. We started immediately writing our own music. We had a manager, so we were going places because we had a manager. But at least we thought we were. So we started rehearsing. As it turned out, the players in the band, they were quite good because they listened to good music, and they were influenced not just by whatever kind of mediocre run of the mill band. They were listening to the heavy stuff, and a lot of the progressive type music in the 70s, your Genesis, Yes, King Crimson, Floyd, Rush, all these type of bands, high levels of musicians. So that was the kind of an influence on us. We kept writing. We were doing demo tapes. We were doing gigs. We were getting a bit of a following, some radio, some TV. We got an offer of a deal in Italy. It was a strange deal, but we were only a year out of high school, secondary school, so we took it. You know, it's like, well, why wouldn't we? What have we got to lose? So we went over, and we ended up in a professional recording studio for a few months, learning how to play the click tracks, learning how to get along with each other, learning how to um, listen to a producer and not lose your mind because you didn't agree with what he said or what he wanted you to do. But it was a great learning curve for us. And being in a country that we didn't know, we had to try and learn the language. And we made our own friends over there. And we went back and started gigging and making a living, playing around northeast of Italy, around the, near kind of Venice. And then after a while, we were back and forth, but then we had an American manager. Like, look, guys, this isn't happening in Italy, and it's not going to happen in Ireland. So what do? We go to London, we go to LA, or we go to New York. Well, we knew one person in New York. We didn't know anybody in LA, and London was just too nuts and too expensive. So we chose New York, and we came over here, got a bit of a deal with Warner Chappell, and that helped us kind of get, put a little bit of juice in the tank, and brought us over full time. So we were playing and playing and playing, and literally banging down the doors of record companies for a couple of years until RCA signed the band, and that was hard. A record deal, even in the early 2000s, very hard to get. The industry had already started to fall apart because of Napster and all this kind of stuff. All the investors were pulling out of the record industry. So, and the grunge was over. That was done. So it was the early 2000s. It was a little bit of no man's land for bands. Very hard to get in, but we got a little bit of, we made the album out in San Francisco with Jerry Harrison. He's the keyboard player for Talking Heads. And after that, we went out on the road. We were playing with Sheryl Crow, Bryan Adams, Journey, Van Halen, The Who. We did some shows with. And a bunch of these tours and festivals and stuff like that, the big festivals here. So listen, we're on the road. We're in a van. We're not sure if we're going to get to the next gig, if it's going to blow up or not. But we'll go. Well, that actually happened a few times. Driving from New York to San Francisco, a van blew up. We had to buy another one in nowhere in Pennsylvania. We didn't make it that far. We made it to Pennsylvania. That's a couple of states from New York. We had the rest of the country. So we bought another van, and that same problem that blew up in Nevada. Just when we were getting into California, delayed us another couple of days, made it to San Francisco and stayed there for a few months to make a record. But yeah, a lot of rock and roll stories, and some crazy gigs,
Yeah.
some good, some really really bad ones, But it was a fun life. It's a hard life. Anybody who, you know, yeah, I want to grow up to be a rock star. Yeah, so what? I want to be an astronaut. Well, it's just as hard at this point. But we didn't care. That's what it was. You got four guys in the band, determined, stubborn, know each other, have a lot of fun, and kind of we had our own little sound, our own little vibe going on, and we were liked. Okay, now we weren't selling out stadiums or anything like it, but we were very well supported and sold some albums and all the rest of it. So it was a fun time. Lasted 20 years, but the band is gone.
Yeah, I mean, 20, yeah, 20 years, that's massive. And it's something that sometimes you don't hear a lot from pipe band drumming. I mean, one of the reason I'm having those interviews is because you have people within the pipe band world that are doing things that you might not expect. And if we were to or people will listen to you play, they might, or the core, they might not like realize that you actually had a career in touring and all those things that you just shared. And I think that's fantastic to hear and open up a little bit more about who this people are within the pipe band community. What, like, just to wrap things up, we're almost at 45 minutes, but what are you up to now? Obviously I know, but most people probably are not aware of. So you're still in the New York area. You haven't left after you moved here to play with the rock band. You have a couple of bands that you're teaching. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, I got married. A wonderful woman, Leticia. I have a baby girl, Scarlett. She's 3.5, and you know, that little girl's my world. She's amazing. And so, yeah, I'm living in New Jersey. My Instead of trying to just live off, sessions or the odd gig, I had to go get a real job. But it's a union job with the local one, elevator constructors, and I got it because they had a pipe band and they needed my help. And another, I've 7 bands right now. I've always been teaching pipe bands over here. And one of my guys in Metro came up to me, he's like, "Hey, listen, you still teaching?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So will you take on the elevator constructors, local one? I'm like, "The elevator? Who? What?" I didn't even know who they were or what they were, and they had a band. A year later, I'm working for them. So it's they asked me, "Listen, we'll help you. Just take over as lead tip. I know we're only a parade band, but you have to be lead tip." I'm like, "All right, that's a fair enough deal. No problem. I'll do that." So we're not competing, uh, but we do our own kind of corporate events and stuff like that. And I have a bunch of I have 3 grade 5 bands I'm teaching, a couple of other parade bands. I teach the NYPD. That's a nice gig to have. Those guys have been very good to me for the last 12 or 13 years. Um, and what else? I'm judging as well. So I've I'm doing 4 pipe band events a week, teaching, and so I'm still in it, and I plan to get back with New York Metro hopefully next year, not as lead tip because you've done it and done it very, very well. I had a shot off it and it was good. Now it's Michael Rourke's turn, and he wants to go at it, and I
Exactly.
don't know capable of doing it. So hey, listen, why not? Um, so yeah. I had a couple of false starts with some other bands, Dunedin, Ulster Scottish, great bands. I just didn't. I thought I'd be able to get to them and commit at least for a year. Didn't happen in the end, unfortunately. I was just so
Happens.
busy, you know.
Yeah, and that's funny that for I mean I don't even know if I didn't know that. I mean, I was like you. I didn't know that elevator company would have a pipe band or NYPD would have a pipe band. But actually,
Yep.
a lot of like these entities within in the states, in New York especially, have a pipe band. So it's funny that for those listening that are not aware of it, you have firefighters will have a band and obviously need a
Yeah.
teacher
There's
to write
colleges,
music.
there's
So
unions, there's small clubs, there's Irish associations. They have their tartan day for the Scottish side of it every April, and of course Paddy's Day. It goes on for a month over here. It's crazy. In Ireland, it's one day, just one day, but
I know.
there's parade every weekend for at least 4 to 5 weeks. And so you could play with any band and every band you want. I've done three. One parade I did it 3 times with 3 different drum corps. I just kept going around in circles and go, all right, well these guys, I'll jump in. I was teaching them, whatever. I knew most of the scores because I wrote them, and but like one parade on one day is enough. You don't need to be doing it 3 times. I was hurting after that one.
That should be in the Guinness World Record of how many parade you can do in one day, and you've done three. I'd be curious to hear if more people have done more than three a day with three different bands. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a busy life, busy schedule, but thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything else you want to promote before we wrap it up?
Oh no, I'm not releasing a new film, or I didn't just write my new book. No, none of that stuff. I'm not promoting anything. I'm just doing my thing, and I'm very glad to talk to you, Darren. You're a great
Yeah, it
drummer
was it was great.
on this here, you know.
Thank Yeah, thank you so much. It was fantastic. I'm so glad we got to talk about, especially the musical aspect of things and how you approach writing music and listening to music. I think that would be something that I haven't had sort of a conversation with a drummer like that before. So I'm excited to release the episode and have people listen to it. So yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy the evening and the holidays. If I don't see you before, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with everyone.
Come on, thank you very much, Darren. Best of luck. I'll see you
Thank
soon.
you. Take
All
care.
right, cheers.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.